Ask a knowledgeable sports fan who invented baseball, and their answer would most likely be Abner Doubleday. Baseball historians might debate the Doubleday theory, but they'd all agree that the essence of America's favorite pastime was borrowed from the English games of cricket and rounders. Football, American style, was a hybrid of two English sports as well, soccer and rugby football. Who invented American football? Football chroniclers would probably leave that question open for discussion. They would agree, though, that Walter Camp was the father of American football and that one of the most innovative and successful college coaching pioneers was Amos Alonzo Stagg. Basketball originated in 1891 at the International YMCA Training School, now known as Springfield College, in Springfield, Massachusetts. Although the game is American in origin, its creator, James Naismith, was a Canadian by birth. Basketball's Naismith and football's Stagg were friends, coaches, and mentors of the man who created one of the world's most popular participant sports. The man and the sport he created were both born in the USA. The sport? Volleyball. Its birthplace? Holyoke, Massachusetts. The inventor? William G. Morgan. His birthplace? Lockport, New York. Welcome to the William G. Morgan story, a story about the life and legacy of the man who created one of the world's most popular sports, a man who preferred to neither draw attention to his achievement nor to prosper from it. We'll show you when and where he lived his life, who influenced him to choose the college he graduated from, what he accomplished during his brief but innovative YMCA career, why he chose to return to his roots and live in relative obscurity, and how a foundation named in his honor hopes to preserve and perpetuate his rightful place of prominence among the legendary names of sports history. George Henry Morgan was born in Pembroke, Wales in 1841. At age 14, he began a 7-year shipbuilder's apprenticeship at the Pembroke Dock Boatyards. After completing his apprenticeship, he made arrangements to leave Wales and sail for America. He was able to pay for this journey by making repairs on the ship while it sailed on course. You could say that George's workmanship during his journey gave him more than a vested interest for a successful voyage, not only to secure the opportunity for a new life, but because he couldn't swim. George Morgan arrived in America to find the Civil War separating the nation. He settled in St. Louis, Missouri, and worked for the government as a boat builder at the naval yards there. In 1868, he was encouraged to apply his trade in the western New York area by Thomas Nash, a friend of the Morgan family from Wales. A few years earlier, the Nashes had settled in Lockport, New York. George moved to Lockport and for a time stayed with the Nash family. He worked as a ship's carpenter and builder with various boat companies in St. Catharines, Canada, Tonawanda, and Lockport. Nancy Chatfield, originally from Northfield, Vermont, operated a writing school on Market Street in Lockport. George enrolled in Miss Chatfield's school to learn how to use his left hand to accommodate his writing skills. He had seriously injured his right hand at work. During the course of their teacher-pupil relationship, George and Nancy grew fond of each other, and after a brief courtship, were married. They would eventually raise 6 children. William G. Morgan, their first son, was born on January 23, 1870. By By 1887, George and his brother Alfred, also a ship's carpenter, entered into a partnership and formed the Morgan Brothers Boat Builders. Morgan Brothers provided canal boats, tugboats, steam propellers, and yachts for use in the United States, as well as a large number of boats and dredges for the Canadian government. The Morgan Brothers shipyard consisted of several buildings in addition to a log pond and 3 dry docks. There was a woodworking building, a carpenter's paint shop, a canal boat building, a storage building, and an office building. During peak building seasons, they employed 35 workers. One of their workers was Will Morgan, George's son. At age 15, young Will decided that he no longer needed to attend school. His father and uncle put him to work at the boatyards, figuring that in time he'd realize that going to school wasn't so bad after all. They were right. Will, who had a natural bent for mathematics and machinery, decided that his talents were best suited for a career in the field of mechanical engineering. He also understood that he not only had to go back to school, he had to go back to a school that would prepare him for acceptance into a college of mechanical engineering curriculum. He chose to begin his studies at the Mount Hermon Preparatory School in Northfield, Massachusetts. Applying to such a school would be the easy part. Getting accepted would be quite another matter.
Mr. Henry E. Sawyer, Mount Hermon School, Franklin County, Massachusetts. Dear Sir, I have been thinking quite seriously of fitting myself for a mechanical engineer, and to make a success of my profession, I am in need of an education. There has been 2 of my gentlemen friends attending school at Mount Hermon, and they recommended it and advised me to take a term or 2 and more if possible. I understand the tuition is very reasonable and my means are limited, so I thought I would try to procure admission. I would like to enter next February if possible, or as soon as you can make a place. Yours truly, William G. Morgan, number 88 Alcott Street, Lockport, New York.
Dear Mr. Morgan, enclosed is an admissions application to the Mount Hermon School. A parent or guardian is required to fill out and return this form. Applicants are requested to answer every question with equal care and candor. Flattering or misleading statements regarding the mental and moral character of a candidate may bring about his admission to the school, but will only act against him when he is here seen and known. Every candidate accepted is received upon the understanding that he will prove himself worthy of the advantages offered him or consent to forfeit them. Lazy boys are not desired. Henry F. Cutler, Superintendent, Mount Hermon School. November 11, 1890. Mr. J.S. Hilmer. Dear Sir, William G. Morgan is a candidate for admissions to this school, and we have been referred to you for information in regard to his character, traits, and ability. Please write us frankly and confidentially concerning him, and oblige. Yours truly, Henry F. Cutler, Mount Hermon, Superintendent.
November 13, 1890. Dear Sir, William G. Morgan is a young man of good character, ambitious to get an education and of good ability. He's not very far advanced for the reason that for a time he did not appreciate his need of an education, but has seen his mistake and is now anxious to make up for lost time. He is industrious and has been working rather than attending school, but as I have stated, he now wants to study and will do his best. He is a bright young man and a Christian. Very truly yours, J.S. Helmer, businessman, Lockport, New York.
January 6, 1891, Office of Morgan Brothers, Central and City Dry Docks. Mr. Henry F. Cutler, Superintendent of Mount Hermon. Dear Sir, yours of January 3rd and its contents noted, and in reply would say we will endeavor to meet the requirements mentioned, as our son as well as ourselves are quite anxious to get started in this matter of an education. Therefore, you may consider this an acceptance of the privilege of his becoming a student at your institution. Yours truly, George H. Morgan. P.S. Since writing the above, I find it's not possible for William to get to Mount Hermon from this place in one day. Therefore, if it is essential for him to be there before the school opens, he can leave here on the Friday previous and arrive at your place on Saturday, January 31st, or on Tuesday, February 3rd. Please advise what you think best, and oblige, George Morgan.
Will Morgan's formal education began February 3rd, 1891. He was pleased with his choice of Mount Hermon and certain he was headed in the right direction toward fulfilling his career goal. He would, one day, not too far away, become a mechanical engineer. At least, that was his plan. Mount Hermon was not only an outstanding academic institution, it also offered a diversity of extracurricular activities. Two of the activities Will participated in were football and choir. Each would play a significant role throughout his lifetime. His football ability would lead him to Springfield College and a new career. Singing in the choir's vocal quartet would lead to his introduction to Mary Caldwell, which in time would lead them both down the aisle. Will played center on Mount Hermon's varsity football team. He was a big, strong, athletic young man whose football skills caught the attention of a coach from one of the nearby colleges. The coach was impressed with Will's football ability, but even more so with his character. He encouraged Will to come to his school not only to play football, but to prepare himself for a career with the YMCA. The International YMCA Training School was located in Springfield, Massachusetts. The coach who convinced Will to attend there was not only a coach, but a graduate of medical school and a Presbyterian minister. He personified the YMCA ideology of body, mind, and spirit, and thought Will Morgan could do the same. The coach, James Naismith, the inventor of basketball. His assistant, Amos Alonzo Stagg, who would become one of the most innovative and successful coaches in college football history.
What I think is really interesting with William Morgan is the time that he left Lockport and went to Mount Hermon School. He had been out of school and really wanted to go into engineering, attended Mount Hermon, and that's when he came in contact with some Springfield greats, including James Naismith. He met James Naismith on the football field. Morgan was a center for Mount Hermon, and they played the training school, the Springfield Training School. That's what we were called in those days, the YMCA Training School. And it's curious that just in that same fall of 1892, we see Morgan listed playing for Mount Hermon. About a month later, when those two teams met again, he was playing for Springfield. So Naismith was quite a recruiter. Morgan also came in contact with Luther Gulick, who's well known for his impact in physical education, and I think those people had a big impact on him.
I don't know what influence they had on each other. I think that maybe he did have some influence. I know they were close together. Mr. Morgan, of course, was the originator of volleyball, and I've always thought it interesting that two great sports came out of that particular area and particular association.
Mount Hermon was a boys-only school. When Will was there, it turned out that no one from the student body played piano. Mary Caldwell, a native of Northfield, Massachusetts, was a student at the Northfield Seminary for Girls. A talented musician, she was chosen to be the piano accompanist for the Mount Hermon Boys Vocal Quartet, a decision that Will would be forever grateful for. The quartet performed at school functions and occasionally in and around the city of Northfield. In particular, they traveled with Dr. Dwight Moody on his evangelistic missions to the surrounding area's churches. Will and Mary would fall in love, and it wasn't long before he asked her to be his lifelong accompanist. They were married October 7th, 1893. The early years of their nearly 50-year marriage would test Mary's ability to cope with the nomadic lifestyle dictated by Will's career. She passed with flying colors. Springfield, Massachusetts, Auburn, Maine, Holyoke, Massachusetts, and New Haven, Connecticut were just some of the steps on Will's YMCA career ladder. By this time, Mary had given birth to Lillian, George, Robert, and James Morgan. Will realized by then he would have to change careers to provide for his growing family. He had never forgot his first love, engineering, and devoted his spare time studying books on the subject. His perseverance enabled him to become competent enough to secure employment with the General Electric Company. More moves would follow. Secaucus in Jersey City, New Jersey, and Quincy, Massachusetts. Will met a man from Texas who convinced him to invest his savings and Mary's inheritance in a lumber business in Port Boulevard, Texas. The business failed. The family moved back to Lockport, New York, Will's hometown.
He went down there. It was Port Bolivar, which is near Galveston. And shortly after they got there, they had a flood. And of course then the mosquitoes came and all that. So he lost all his money, and then so he came to Lockport. But it wasn't his money, it was his wife's money. She came from a rather well-to-do family, and her father was King Caldwell. I think it was Rufus was the first name. Aunt Mary was a very quiet woman, very dignified, but very much a WCTU woman. You didn't drink in her house. She was very, very, a lady.
Will graduated from Springfield in June of 1894. That same year, he and Mary Caldwell Morgan would have cause to celebrate on two other occasions: the birth of their first child, Lillian, and Will's appointment as Director of Physical Activities at the Auburn, Maine YMCA. Their stay in Auburn, however, was short-lived. In 1895, Will transferred to the YMCA in Holyoke, Massachusetts. By August of that year, the Morgan's second child, George, named for Will's father, was born. 4 years earlier, in 1891, Will's friend and mentor, Dr. James Naismith, invented the game of basketball. Although basketball was popular with young men in several schools and YMCAs, the members of Morgan's YMCA businessmen's class considered the game too strenuous for a noontime activity. Will decided he needed to develop a game that was less strenuous than basketball, yet would serve as a suitable recreational exercise. His original game concept was pure and simple. First, a net was stretched across the width of the gym. He then had the members of his businessman's class take positions on each side of the net. Using the rubber bladder from a basketball as the game ball, the players on each side batted the ball back and forth. He called his newly developed game Mintonette. Two members of his class, Frank Wood, a local physician, and John Lynch, chief of the fire department, helped him draw up a set of formal rules. Before long, mintonette became the favorite recreational activity at the Holyoke YMCA. In June of 1896, Dr. Luther Halsey Gulick, National YMCA Executive Secretary of the Physical Education Department, invited Morgan to put on a mintonette demonstration at the YMCA Physical Directors Conference held at Springfield, Massachusetts YMCA. Morgan took 2 5-man teams comprised of members from his Holyoke businessman's class. Several months before, the A.G. Spalding Company had developed a special mintonette game ball using a rubber bladder encased in a leather cover. At the end of the demonstration, Professor Alfred T. Halstead proposed calling Morgan's new game Volleyball, due to the volleying nature of the game. Will Morgan agreed with Professor Halstead's assessment. Mintonette would thereafter be called Volleyball. Thanks to the influence of people like James Naismith, who recruited Will Morgan, and to other athletic greats at the Springfield YMCA Training School, William Morgan has found a place in history as the inventor of one of the biggest participant sports in the world. Since the birth of the game in 1895, the world has seen the sport progress in ways that Will Morgan couldn't have imagined. Volleyball can be found in most every high school, college, and playground throughout the country. Since 1943, the armed services have embraced it as a means of recreation and as an example of working together. From a small gymnasium in Holyoke, Massachusetts, to states across the country, to the Olympic Games in 1964, volleyball has become a sport enjoyed around the world. Due to the growing popularity of college and beach volleyball, the sport continues to grow and receives nationwide attention through broadcasts and publications. There's even a William G. Morgan Foundation, which awards a trophy to the most outstanding college male and female volleyball player of the year. Will returned to Lockport, New York in 1898, where he became physical director at his hometown YMCA until 1900. Will did not return to the Springfield campus until 1938, 42 years after his mintonette exhibition. On March 22, 1939, the Springfield alumni arranged a dinner reception for William Morgan in his hometown of Lockport, where he was presented a varsity sweater in recognition of his achievements in volleyball. William G. Morgan's YMCA career had taken him on many travels, not only here in the United States, but he even went so far as Sweden for training in massage therapy. Will, in his later years, also became a bicycle racing coach, something he thoroughly enjoyed. Will left the YMCA and followed his engineering interests by going to work for the Harrison Radiator Company, where he worked until his retirement. William G. Morgan died December 27, 1942, at the age of 72. Since his death, Will has been inducted into his Lockport hometown's Walk of Fame and has also had a volleyball park there dedicated to him and his invention. In Holyoke, Massachusetts, where William Morgan first invented the game, is the Volleyball Hall of Fame. The first inductee was none other than William G. Morgan. Construction plans are underway for a new Hall of Fame, which will include hands-on demonstrations along with indoor and outdoor courts to play the game.
Well, the Hall of Fame was really an inspiration of 35 individuals that worked with the Chamber of Commerce back in 1971. They had an idea that they should develop a Hall of Fame for the sport of volleyball because it was invented here. And then in '78 they incorporated. In 1985 we held our first induction and inducted William Morgan himself, the inventor. And that was a really proud day for the city of Holyoke to bring Morgan and the Hall of Fame and volleyball to the center stage. Later in 1987 we opened our first permanent exhibit, and just last year in October of '98 we opened up the expanded area that we have today.
As the sport of volleyball continues to grow, it will no doubt continue to see changes. Although it has become a highly competitive sport, nothing seemed to please the inventor more than seeing everyday people having fun, exercising, and playing his game.
I never knew Morgan. He's one of the two people in the Hall of Fame that I never knew. Regrettably, he had passed on before I came into the program. I know a lot about him. Our books are full of stories about Morgan. He obviously had a different purpose when he designed the game than we've taken it to now. He wanted an exercise course for businessmen. We've made it a competitive course for young athletes. Is it better? I don't know, but it's our game today.
William Morgan. Where I am and where I'm going is probably due in large part to William Morgan. I've spent my life in volleyball, and he's on my wall. A great photo from the Hall of Fame. And in 1985, the Soviet Union came here, and we had a match, USA Cup, and we ended up playing them in the finals. And we gave every participant a photo of the YMCA, and also half of the photo was with William Morgan. And I think they had baggage of souvenirs that they had collected along the way, but they held those things as very, very special gifts. And he meant not only a lot to the people in the United States, but to the Soviet Union and people throughout the world. And we're very grateful for what he did for our sport. And I was lucky enough to coach a gold medal Olympic team, and again, there's no gold medal, no Marv Dunphy there at the Olympic Games if it wasn't for Mr. Morgan.
He was very outgoing, and it's mostly the sense of humor that he had that I think came through. I remember he talked to me one day about the fact that he was able in his lifetime to observe a game between Rochester and Japan. And it was great that he lived long enough to see volleyball become an international sport. He was just so pleased it had. And he never was a bragging person.
I think later in Morgan's life, by 1928, the United States Volleyball Association had been formed. He must have been amazed by that, to know that there was a national association for his sport, the sport that he had started. And he did come back to Springfield College. 10 years later, 1938, just a few years before he passed away, he came back kind of unexpectedly. And the college was able to interview him and get his reaction to this growth of the sport that he had invented. And he shared how amazed he was, but how pleased he was that others had taken the game that he came up with and had developed it to the point that it had already spread around the country and across the globe.